Now to Trudeau's Canada, where craziness is its middle name. Imagine being unvaccinated in Canada and you find out that you need to have an organ transplant, but you are then denied that organ transplant because you are unvaccinated. You decided to not get one of these Pfizer shots, one of these Moderna shots to protect your body. You're denied the organ transplant as a result. Then a member of parliament, a member of Trudeau's government, comes out and says, after she dies for being unable to get this organ transplant, she deserved to die. This is what's happening in Canada. Plus, we've got a renewed push for mask mandates in Canada. Covering all of these stories for us today is David Krayden. He hosts Krayden's Right on YouTube. He writes at the Post Millennial and Human Rights, and he joins us now. David, great to see you. This story is outrageous. A member of parliament decides to jump on Twitter after a woman dies from being denied an organ transplant and says, oh, she deserved it. She deserved it.
Well, I want to read the tweet, well, as they say now, the post on X. And I know Charlie Angus from my days on Parliament Hill. He always sold himself as a populist, which is why, as a New Democratic member of Parliament, which is the Socialist Party in Canada, he's managed to stay elected in a relatively small C conservative area of Northern Ontario. But recently, Sherry Annette Lewis died about a week ago because she couldn't get an organ transplant. And she was unvaccinated, and that's the only reason she couldn't get an organ transplant. So Charlie Angus decides to post, a woman died because she preferred to fight for disinformation, anti-vax bullshit, and conspiracy. Pierre Poilievre says she is a hero. And the rest of it really isn't related to Sherry Annette Lewis. But that, to me, is just beyond the pale. And it's not just outrageous, it's almost criminal. This is, for a member of parliament to be celebrating somebody dying because she's on the wrong side of the issue, this to me is absolutely symbolic of how crazy the authoritarian left has become in Canada. And they'd rather see somebody die because they couldn't get an organ transplant than admit there was absolutely no reason for her to be vaccinated. And that's really the other story here, is that she didn't even get COVID. She was unvaccinated and she didn't get COVID because she had natural immunity to it. And this is how outrageous this is.
What's more outrageous, well, that's outrageous enough, but what's perhaps more outrageous is the idea that you would deny at a national level, I guess, I don't know if it's a national level or provincial level, that you would deny someone getting an organ transplant because they're unvaccinated. What sort of bureaucratic gobbledygook is in place that keeps someone from getting an organ transplant? Where did this come from?
What really infuriates me is that this woman came from Alberta, where supposedly it's the last bastion of the free in Canada. It's the last place where you're allowed to voice dissent, where the premier of that province has previously said that the unvaccinated are the most discriminated against group that she's ever seen in her lifetime. And yet she did nothing to intervene with Alberta healthcare. And you have to remember, in Canada, we are on universal healthcare, supposedly free, but of course it's not. So this woman was denied it in Alberta, and she would have been denied the organ transplant in any province in Ontario, because every provincial healthcare scheme is supplemented by the federal government. So they are working in tandem. She tried to go to the United States to get the operation. She tried, and her supporters tried to raise money for her. They didn't raise enough fast enough, and she died. This is how tragic this is. But you know what the reason is? And this is mind-boggling. The reason they won't do an organ transplant for the unvaccinated is they say, having a new organ makes you more susceptible to viral infection. So therefore, we'd rather you not get the organ transplant. So that's not even a catch-22. That is just downright insanity. So they'd rather see you die with a failing organ than get a new organ on the assumption that you might be somehow more susceptible to the COVID-19 virus. Now, how insane is that?
That's absolutely insane. So you're going to die from a viral infection because what? The organ has COVID? I mean, it makes no sense at all. And I think we've had the Canadian Parliament admitting basically that they're not using science, they're using politics in these decisions. I mean, we've learned this, right, through lawsuits. So this is not science.
No, and it shows you it's all about ideology. It's about crazy healthcare ideology, because she has already demonstrated that she was not susceptible to COVID. And even if she was, the chance of her dying from COVID are minuscule compared to the certainty of her dying without a new organ. And you know what? And she's not the only one this has happened to. I mean, there was another case here in Ontario of a guy named Garnet Harper, who was denied an organ transplant for the same reason. He was unvaccinated. And what makes this even more insidious is that on his deathbed, the nurse came around to say, "Can we collect your organs when you die?" So not only was he denied a life-saving organ, they wanted to collect his organs. And his wife was so outraged by this, she just said, forget it. Forget it. We're not buying into this. You won't even give my husband an organ transplant. He's dying. He's on his deathbed. And you're coming around with the form so he can sign off and he can sign over his organs. I mean, is this 1984 we're living in Canada? I think so.
Which brings us to these mask mandates and the push for renewed mask mandates. So out in Vancouver, you got, craziness on that coast as well. You had a renewed push for, you have activists calling for a push for mask mandates in Vancouver, in Canada at large. And we're starting to see this more and more now as this new variant of COVID is taking hold. The Biden administration, of course, calling on Congress to approve billions more for the biopharmaceutical complex to roll this out. And this all follows on a story we just had on the show the other night about COVID masks and how those surgical masks have a massive amounts of toxins in them. So now you have activists in Canada pushing for a return to mask mandates.
What brought me out here is my basic moral outrage.
Outrage over masking protocols that were dropped in BC in April. A Do Not Harm BC protest was held outside the office of Adrian Dix, BC's health minister, calling on the provincial government to reinstate mandatory masking in healthcare settings.
What do you make of this?
Well, the fact that this occurred in Vancouver doesn't surprise me. Vancouver's gone the way of San Francisco and Los Angeles. But it goes to show you how maniacal the left has become, or not even just the left, the people who seem to love authoritarianism in their life. They love to have the state dictate what they should do and what they shouldn't do. So here's these people, despite overwhelming evidence that the masks not only didn't prevent COVID-19 in any real way, that they might have actually contributed to your unhealth. They might have actually contributed to you being unhealthy. And despite that, they're begging the BC Minister of Health to bring back mask mandates, please, so we can wear these and our children can go to school and suffocate all day, and we can continue to breathe in these toxins. And even if you don't believe there's toxins in the mask, you're breathing in your own CO2 all day long. And of course, that's no good for you, especially since it's doing nothing to fend off the virus.
We had multiple doctors tell us that that's the reason my daughter got pneumonia, was breathing back in the bacteria that was causing her pneumonia, and wound up in the hospital as a result of it. Countless children with that exact same issue and pulmonary issues as a result of these masks. And it turns out multiple studies showing that these N95 masks offer zero protection against the COVID virus. So now, the sort of authoritarian, the love of dictatorship, the love of authoritarianism in Canada, pushing for people to wear masks around them, telling other people what to do with their body. And there was this whole strain of shaming, the mask shaming. So are you seeing like a return to mask shaming now in Canada? You don't have one. It's getting cold out there. COVID's back. You're on public transportation. You're in a school. You're in a mall. You better be wearing a mask again.
Well, I haven't seen it yet, but I sure saw it during the height of the pandemic, and I expect to see it again. But it's interesting to me at this protest, there was a counter protest, thank God, from other people in Vancouver who think this is insanity. But it's interesting that the pro-mask people physically attacked the anti-mask people.
Right.
And this to me illustrates how wacky the pro-mask left has become. They think they have the right to attack people for not wearing masks. I've never felt that if you really want to wear a mask, that is your right. And I might quietly laugh at people who are riding their bikes down a path or jogging with a mask on. I'll do that quietly because I think it's not just ludicrous, it's insane. But I'm certainly not going to attack that person for wearing a mask. That is,
I might laugh at the
decision
person
he or she has made.
I might quietly laugh at the person. I was literally last week. I was on a glacier in the middle of Norway. You can't get more remote than that, and the air is as crisp and clean as you could imagine. And there's a person there on the glacier, no one around wearing a mask. I thought, my God, this is what it's come to. This is what it's come to, that they've been so programmed into thinking somehow that's helping them. They're being protected against a glacier from getting COVID or whatever they think they're getting as a result of it. But I would never think to attack this person over. I'm quietly going to laugh at this person. That's my right. This clown world that we live in, but I'm not going to attack a person over their mask wearing.
Well, and that's precisely how most common sense people react, not with physical violence, because they just think, I have my right not to wear a mask. You have your right to wear a mask. And to me, the fact that there were counter protesters here is indicative that there's still hope for this country, because I hear it all the time from a lot of American commentators. They have dismissed Canada as a foregone authoritarian conclusion. But thank God, a lot of Canadians are fighting back. We saw it with this counter protest in Vancouver, and we're seeing it on other issues. And not to be off topic, but this month we're going to see a 1 million person march against Trudeau's gender ideology, and we're seeing people who are fed up with the whole left-wing agenda. And I tell you, this time around, it's not going to be as easy as it was the last time around for Justin Trudeau to put masks on everybody. And for these authoritarian premiers who were just as bad as some of those state governors who were lockdown kings and queens, it's not going to be that easy this time around, because people are going to push back, because Canada has a basic sense of freedom and democracy that has not yet been extinguished by this authoritarian Justin Trudeau government. I believe and I hope Canadians are going to continue to push back and fight back for their democratic rights.
I hope so too. We have many tens of thousands of Canadians who watch this show. So please push back against this tyranny. I hope that they will. And thank you for shining a light on it, David. David Krayden, you can catch him on Krayden's Right over on YouTube. Thank you so much for this, and continued keeping an eye on the craziness that has been unfolding in Canada. Thanks so much, David.
Thank you for having me, Clayton.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.